In the luxurious building of a major investment firm, the hallways were always brightly lit. The echo of secretaries' heels resonated across the marble floors, and the air of superiority from the executives lingered like an expensive perfume. In that environment, any sign of weakness was reason for laughter, and it was there that Lucas took his first steps as an intern. He was young, modest, and didn't wear the same refined suits as the others. His clothes were always simple, and his eyes carried a touch of insecurity. From his very first day, the harsh comments began. "That one won't last a week. Just look at him, lost already. I bet he can't handle the pace here." Lucas pretended not to hear, but each word weighed heavily on his mind. Deep down, he knew it wouldn't be easy. That world of million-dollar figures, international contracts, and endless meetings was far from the life he grew up in. Coming from a humble family, used to fighting with little, he carried within him a determination no one there could imagine. What his colleagues didn't know was that Lucas observed everything in silence. While they mocked him for bringing the wrong coffee or not understanding a complex spreadsheet right away, he used every chance to learn. The intern, whom everyone saw as disposable, was carefully storing away every detail, every strategy, every flaw in the company. During one meeting, a director sneered, "This intern is just dead weight. If he lasts a month, it'll be a miracle." Laughter filled the room, but Lucas remained calm. Inside him, a fire was lit. He didn't just want to prove he could last a day. He wanted to prove that no one there would ever forget him. It was the beginning of a silent journey. The humiliated intern was starting down the path that, years later, would lead him back for a triumphant return, not as a trainee, but as the man who would take control of the entire company. Lucas came from a humble neighborhood, where dreams were often swallowed by harsh reality. The son of a hardworking seamstress and a bus driver, he grew up watching his parents struggle just to keep their home standing. There was no luxury, but there were values. Honesty, perseverance, and the belief that education could transform destinies. It was thanks to a scholarship that he managed to get into university and later land the long-dreamed-of internship at one of the country's largest investment firms, Fortuna Global. But within the glass walls of that corporation, Lucas's values seemed to have no place. There, arrogance, vanity, and money were what spoke loudest. The teammates who mocked him the most were well-known figures in the office. Raphael, the brilliant but arrogant analyst, was the one who poured the most venom. Son of a famous banker, he wore his last name like a crown and loved humiliating anyone who didn't share the same privileged background. Always surrounded by flatterers, he was quick to spot Lucas's insecurities, and even quicker to turn them into jokes. Clara, assistant to one of the directors, had sharp eyes and a venomous smile. Proud of working close to the top brass, she looked down on anyone who didn't dress in international designer brands. To her, Lucas was nothing more than another poor boy trying to blend in. It was common to hear her say things like, "That kid looks lost. I bet he came from some cheap little school." Then there was Marcelo, a veteran intern who, instead of extending a hand to Lucas, saw him as a threat. Marcelo was desperate to secure a permanent position, and for that reason treated the newcomer as a rival to be crushed. He went out of his way to make things harder, hiding information, sabotaging tasks, and setting Lucas up for embarrassing situations whenever possible. Each of these characters became an obstacle in Lucas's journey, but at the same time, without realizing it, they were shaping his strength. Lucas endured in silence. He stored away the humiliations, the looks of disdain, the muffled laughter in the corridors. But inside him, with each insult, grew a silent vow. He would prove to everyone that he was not worthless. What no one knew was that outside those walls, Lucas spent sleepless nights studying reports, devouring economics books, and teaching himself what no one cared to explain. While the others enjoyed expensive parties, he worked twice as hard, preparing the ground for the future that would, sooner or later, arrive. Time inside Fortuna Global felt like a daily test for Lucas. He arrived early, before everyone else, and was often the last to leave. But despite all his effort, he was still seen as nothing more than the clumsy intern. In the hallways, the whispers never stopped. "Look, the kid from the slums carrying folders. I bet he can't even pronounce half of the clients' names." Lucas pretended not to hear. What no one realized was that behind that quiet face were watchful eyes. While serving coffee in meetings, he paid close attention to every word spoken by the executives. While organizing spreadsheets, he noticed the calculation mistakes the arrogant analyst made. It was during one of those meetings that he spotted something that would change everything. A major international contract was about to be signed, but in the numbers presented, there were glaring errors. Raphael, the analyst who loved humiliating him, had adjusted the calculations carelessly, confident no one would ever notice. Silently, Lucas copied the data into his notebook and spent the entire night redoing the math. The next day, when the contract was just about to be signed, he timidly asked to speak. The director frowned, surprised that an intern dared to interrupt. "What is it, boy?" With a trembling yet firm voice, Lucas explained the mistakes. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Raphael tried to dismiss him, calling him a cocky trainee, but when the numbers were double-checked, the truth was clear. Lucas was right. The meeting ended with looks of surprise. Some laughed nervously, others remained silent, embarrassed. But for Raphael and the other colleagues who mocked Lucas, that moment was just an inconvenient detail, nothing that would erase the image they had of him as a nobody. For Lucas, however, that moment was the spark. He realized that if he could spot flaws even the most experienced overlooked, he had the potential to go much further. The very world that rejected him was, unknowingly, handing him weapons to fight. With every mistake he witnessed, with every display of vanity corroding the directors, Lucas understood something crucial. Fortuna Global wasn't nearly as perfect as it looked. Behind the shine of skyscrapers and expensive suits, there were massive cracks. And he would be patient, silently keeping track of everything until the day he could use that knowledge to his advantage. Meanwhile, at home, his mother encouraged him. "Son, it doesn't matter what they say. Keep learning. One day, they'll see who you really are." Those words became his strength. Lucas decided that he wouldn't just survive in that place. One day, he would return to prove that the humiliated intern had become someone no one could ever ignore. The humiliations continued, but Lucas no longer saw them as wounds. He saw them as fuel. While his colleagues wasted time at luxurious parties, flaunting cars and designer clothes, he dedicated every night to studying. He bought used books on management, devoured finance manuals, watched free online lectures, and little by little built knowledge no one there could even imagine. It was during this time that he found an unexpected ally. Donna Helena, an old employee of the company who worked as the archive librarian. She was a discreet woman, almost invisible to the men in suits, but she knew the history of Fortuna Global inside and out. When she noticed Lucas's interest, she began showing him documents, old contracts, and even strategic mistakes the board had made in the past. "They only see the shine of money," Helena would say, "but the real power lies with those who understand how everything works behind the scenes." Lucas listened to every word as if it were sacred teaching. While others mocked him, he was silently infiltrating the heart of the company, absorbing information that would one day make all the difference. Soon, he realized something even more serious. Fortuna Global was sinking under reckless decisions, driven by the vanity of its directors. Raphael and Clara, his fiercest critics, were involved in projects riddled with dangerous loopholes. Marcelo, the veteran intern who humiliated him, signed reports without even reading them, just to score points. Lucas began to build a secret archive at home. He stored copies of reports, contracts, and calculation errors, not to take revenge right away, but because he knew that sooner or later he would have the chance to use that material. At the same time, he started investing the little money he earned into small online ventures. He studied entrepreneurship and applied it in practice, turning every penny saved into valuable experience. Within a few years, he had already founded a modest fintech startup aimed at young entrepreneurs like himself. What his colleagues didn't know was that while the clumsy intern was still a laughingstock in the office corridors, outside those walls he was quietly building his own empire. Deep down, Lucas carried a plan. One day, he would return to Fortuna Global, not as a humiliated apprentice, but as someone ready to take control. Every humiliation was a seed planted, and time would reveal the harvest. Years passed. Lucas's name was no longer remembered in the corridors of Fortuna Global. To them, he had been just another intern with no future, probably lost in some mediocre job, but outside that arrogant universe, Lucas had transformed. His startup grew rapidly. With intelligence, strategy, and a solid network of contacts, he attracted investors and expanded his business. In no time, he was running one of the most promising companies in the digital finance sector. Young but visionary, he began to be called the new finance genius in reports and magazines. It was on one of those magazine covers that Raphael, the analyst who had mocked him countless times, saw Lucas's face as an adult for the first time. He almost couldn't believe it. He called Clara, equally stunned, and both fell silent. The boy they once called useless was now a millionaire and a direct competitor to Fortuna Global. Soon after, an emergency meeting was called by the company's board. Lucas's new company was growing at an accelerated pace, stealing clients that had once been exclusive to Fortuna Global. Investors began questioning the solidity of the empire. When it was announced that a strategic merger would be necessary to save the part of the business, the directors were left speechless at the name that appeared as the potential buyer, Lucas Andrade. The day of the confrontation arrived. Lucas walked through the same doors where, years before, he had carried folders and served coffee. But this time, he wore no intern badge. He wore a flawless suit, flanked by trusted lawyers and advisors. His firm posture and confident gaze stood in sharp contrast to the timid young man he had once been. As he entered the boardroom, silence fell. Raphael looked away. Clara swallowed hard, and even the oldest directors froze. The president of Fortuna Global tried to break the tension. "Welcome, Mr. Lucas." But the tone, heavy with false courtesy, fooled no one. Everyone there knew this was the moment when the roles had been reversed. Lucas did not raise his voice. He showed no arrogance. On the contrary, he spoke calmly, each word striking like a hammer. "For years, you told me I didn't belong here. You laughed at me, humiliated me, treated me as if I were invisible. Today, I'm not here to prove anything, but to decide the future of this company." Faces changed color. Some, once haughty, now begged silently with their eyes. The meeting went on with the presentation of numbers, and it became clear that Fortuna Global was in decline. Lucas held not only the chance to save the company, but also the opportunity to show everyone the cost of arrogance. The tension peaked when Raphael tried to intervene, claiming Lucas wasn't prepared to handle something so big. Lucas calmly opened a folder, pulled out the old documents he had kept since his intern days, and placed them on the table. "These were the mistakes made by you and others in this room. Mistakes that destroyed client trust and opened the way for my company to grow. You didn't realize it, but I was learning from every failure. The impact was devastating. The silence in the room was deafening. For the first time, those who once laughed now stood before a man who not only survived humiliation, but used every single one of them as a step to reach the top. The tension in the boardroom was almost unbearable. Restless directors, silent glances exchanged, and Raphael, once arrogant, now stood with sweaty hands pressed against the glass table. Clara, visibly shaken, tried to keep her composure, but her eyes betrayed fear and regret. Lucas, however, remained calm. The humiliated intern no longer existed. Standing before them was the man who now carried the power to decide whether Fortuna Global would survive or be buried once and for all. After presenting the accumulated failures and the old reports he had kept as ammunition, Lucas placed an envelope on the table. "There's something you don't know," he said firmly. The company's president, still clinging to authority, shot back. "What kind of game is this?" Lucas revealed, "During my time as an intern, I noticed inconsistencies in contracts and financial diversions that many of you chose to ignore. I spent years investigating and gathering proof, and I didn't do it alone. Today, that information is already in the hands of regulatory agencies." Silence struck like a thunderclap. The directors exchanged nervous looks, and Raphael's face drained of color. Clara brought a trembling hand to her mouth, unable to hide her shock. Lucas continued, "I'm not here just to negotiate a buyout. I'm here because you need me to prevent total collapse. The difference is, I'm no longer the employee. I'm the one at the head of the table." A murmur of astonishment swept the room. Lucas's lawyers confirmed with official documents. The investigation was underway, and only his presence as the new controller could salvage what little reputation the company still had. That was the moment the tables truly turned. Lucas announced he would purchase the majority of the shares, take over as president, and remove the key figures who had once humiliated him. Justice comes in different forms. Today, it comes through my signature, he declared, holding the pen. Raphael tried to object, but Lucas cut him off coldly. "When you laughed at me, you didn't realize every laugh was fuel. Now, there are no laughs left, only the weight of truth." With his signature, Fortuna Global ceased to be an untouchable empire and passed into the hands of the man once dismissed as worthless. It was a victory not only financial, but moral. The invisible boy was now the man who would reshape the company's future. The silence that followed the signing of the contract was almost deafening. For the first time, the directors who had always considered themselves untouchable were left speechless. Raphael, defeated, let his mask of arrogance fall, revealing just a common man unable to face his own downfall. Clara, tears in her eyes, stared at Lucas as if looking at a ghost from the past, a past she herself had helped destroy. Lucas did not smile, nor did he celebrate. His triumph was not a reason for festivity, but for justice. He slowly walked toward the panoramic window and looked out at the city beyond. That world, once inaccessible to him, was now in his hands. "I never had to shout," he said without turning to anyone. "I just had to wait." Time took care of putting everyone in their place. His words echoed through the room like a final sentence. No humiliation, no mocking laughter could erase what he had achieved. In the days that followed, the news spread across the media. Former intern, once humiliated, takes control of Fortuna Global. Headlines, TV programs, and social networks all echoed the stunning turnaround. To many, Lucas had become a symbol of perseverance and justice. Meanwhile, his former colleagues faced different fates. Raphael was dismissed and, without credibility, watched his career collapse. Clara attempted a public reconciliation, but Lucas gave her no opening. For him, forgiveness did not mean forgetting. And Marcelo, the veteran intern who had mocked him countless times, was reduced to a mere footnote, remembered only as the one who laughed at the man who later became the boss. Lucas, in turn, led Fortuna Global into a new era. He restructured internal policies, valued young talent, and implemented a culture that rewarded effort and merit, not surnames or inherited positions. One day, during an interview, he was asked what he felt when remembering the days he was ridiculed. He took a deep breath and replied, "The pain of humiliation fades. The lessons remain. And it's with those lessons that I built everything I have today." The audience applauded, not for the wealth he had amassed, but for the example he embodied, that no one should ever be underestimated, and that time always reveals who truly has value. And so, the story of the mocked intern who became the man at the head of the table came to an end. An end that was, in truth, only the beginning of a legacy built not on arrogance, but on resilience. Lucas proved, to himself and to the world, that the greatest revenge is not destroying others, but rising above them with dignity.